Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks, Bill.
I tried.
No, we appreciate it.
That's
We're going to unveil that at the February meeting, I think.
Thank you. It looks like it was a cute video. So
Yeah, they did a nice job, and I just want to thank them for their work on that. And so that's going to be viewed by, like I said, by all the superintendents in the state. And I think it was just a nice way to get our name out there and in something something special in with the other districts in the state.
thank you. So that leads us into the superintendent's report. So Dr. Massera.
Okay. I guess we were going to start, I believe we have the budget presentation to start, but perhaps, what do you think, Carrie? Should we go in the other direction,
Yeah,
maybe?
you've got actually the students listed first. So you want to do them first and then I'll jump in?
Yeah. And Janine, do you have that? I get, let me introduce Jeremy. Jeremy, you on? If you could bring
I'll
Jeremy
make him
on.
yep. I'll make him a panelist.
So one of the things, obviously, we wanted to do, we wanted to make sure that we, we're recognizing students. It's more and more difficult under COVID to recognize our students. We haven't been, we started last time, saying, hey, we really need to bring our kids into our meetings. We were doing a good job of that last year. But so clearly this year, we want to make sure that we're recognizing the many accomplishments of our students. So I'm introducing Mr. Thode, who's going to take us through some of those student recognition and staff recognitions today.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Good. Okay, good. So I'm going to start with our Suffolk Zone Award. Give me a second. All right. So each year, Suffolk Zone, which is part of the New York State AFERD, which is the organization that oversees physical education for the state, each year, 2 seniors are recognized for their leadership in physical education. Not only their leadership, but their work in the class, their being role models, doing everything above and beyond in the phys ed realm. So each year, our physical education staff select 2 award winners, and they're recognized by Suffolk Zone and New York State AFERD, and Belle Ramundi and Aiden O'Neill, as you see in the picture behind me. I believe they should be with us. I don't know if you're to show them or how you would like to.
Well, if they're here with us, it would be great if we could bring them up to the panel and recognize them.
Sure.
I see them both on there.
Jeremy, I absolutely love what you did with the background.
Thank you.
I think you're spending a little too much time on Zoom.
I actually had 12 Zooms yesterday.
But that's phenomenal.
So
And
are
so
they here?
clear. That's great.
I see Aiden on there. Yep.
And what's the other one? Isabel.
Isabel Ramundi.
Yep. Go to panelist.
So Aiden and Isabel are outstanding students, athletes, but this specifically is really geared towards their leadership and being role models in our physical education classes and living a healthy lifestyle. So I'd like to honor and recognize Aiden and Isabel for their award.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Wonderful honor. Very nicely done.
Congratulations.
Okay, moving on. Just give me 1 second. So behind me is a certificate that we received from 1017 The Beach. If anybody recalls, a few years ago, we had a tragedy in the Shoreham Wading River community. A football player, Thomas Cutinella, was injured and unfortunately died in a football accident on the field. And there was obviously a lot of coverage to that and a lot of community support for the family. And they started the Thomas Cutinella Award, which each year the beach honors students in memory of Thomas Cutinella. And they do come to me every year with either a staff member or a student who's exhibited, any type of service or any of the traits that Thomas Cutinella did as a student athlete. And this year, I think it was very obvious for me that the friends of Joe Rivera, his classmates, who obviously have done tremendous work in recognizing Joe and his family, supporting Joe and his family, raising funds to do things in the memory of Joe. I think it was hands down one of the most beautiful things I've seen. And we were fortunate enough to have several of our students who are friends with Joe that were on a Zoom with the radio when the award was presented. And that would be Will Bolton, Colin McGill, Colin Leslie, Paul Lagurcio, Jacob DeCoyne, James Debler Seidler, James Schilt, Joe Gallo. They were the students that represented the friends of Joe Rivera, but I do want to make it very clear that the friend group that was involved in all this work was not just these fine young men. It was a lot of our students, male and female, in our entire grade, and obviously a lot of family and community, families and parents and community members as well. But they did represent us very well in the Zoom that was posted on our Facebook page. I do want to point out that this award is now hung right on the entrance to the cafeteria. And the reason I chose that area was just because, obviously throughout the course of the day, whether it's a study hall or a lunch, our students are forever going in and out of that location. And I just wanted to keep that as a memory to Joe and of all the work his friends have done. So I know that a lot of the boys are on right now, but again, they're representing the entire community and they do it so well.
Well, congratulations, guys. I have to say that, when there's a tragedy like this, somebody has to step up and somebody has to be strong. And I commend you guys for under very, very difficult circumstances, losing a friend, doing what you could to try to turn whatever you could into a positive. So a tremendous effort, and thanks, grateful appreciation from all of us and our entire community to you guys for doing everything you did. And this award is certainly well deserved.
Yes, well said, Dr. Massarin. What a wonderful tribute to your friend and what a wonderful way to honor him and his memory. So thank you for that.
Jeremy, you're muted.
Yep, one more. I have one more presentation. So the last presentation I have today is for Haley Hormsdorf and Jaden Keeley. They have, and you can, again, our backdrop, Team Up for Unity. So the reason I have this mask on now is because Jaden is sitting in my office with me. So this award, as we all know, and as we all are embracing diversity and inclusivity, we obviously have a district committee now. We're doing work within our school curriculum. We have a club that is renamed Diversity Inclusivity. So we're doing the work that we need to do to make sure that every student, regardless of race, religion, skin color, sexual orientation, or otherwise, any identity is recognized and appreciated and celebrated and accepted. And this is just another opportunity we have. We have multiple opportunities in diversity and inclusivity, and we are trying to spread it out amongst all our students, whether it be in different committees or workshops or learning environments. And this was another one. So this Team Up from Unity is a partnership between Section 11 for athletics, Section 8, which is Nassau County, and the Long Island Nets, who are basically one of the offshoots of the people who run the Barclays Center and the Brooklyn Nets. So this opportunity came on because I am part of, actually the chairperson of the Diversity Inclusivity Committee for Section 11. I run the committee, and this opportunity came forward, and I was the obvious choice to get involved with this partnership with Section 8 and the Long Island Nets. So part of that was a whole bunch of training on end racism. We've had several of our students involved in some end racism training, And then we had to select students to also be involved in this particular part of the diversity and inclusivity tree, which again is sports. It's really centered around sports. And Jaden and Haley actually were on a training today with me. And ultimately what it is they will be moderators. They will be working with different professionals in the sports world who will come on to a Zoom, and they will moderate and interview these professionals in topics related to diversity and inclusivity. So we did the training today. Ultimately in the future, in the next several months, one of them will, they'll actually be in two separate sessions, but they will have to do research on a guest speaker that will come in. They will interview them. They will ask follow-up questions on all different topics related to diversity and inclusivity. So for example, it could be on race, it could be on women in sports, it could be on bullying, and so forth and so on. So that training is underway. They have been recognized, and they're going to be working with counterparts in Nassau County. That is going to hopefully spread amongst all schools across Long Island. And then this is all these workshops that they're going to moderate and interview are going to be posted on the Long Island Nets website, Teen Up for Unity. And we're going to be spreading this through the athletic world, because we do not want situations where any child, again, whether it's race, gender, or any other identification or identity, we don't want anybody to ever be subjected to bias and discrimination in the athletic world. And this is going to be the work we do to make sure that that does not happen anymore. So, so Haley, I hope Haley's on. I'm going to let Jaden come behind me here. So he's on here. We got Haley. Oh, there she is. So you gotta, there he is. He pops in.
How's it going?
Good to see you, Jane.
So congratulations to Haley and Jaden, and we look forward to not only their work, but again, several of our students who are involved in different committees, whether it's in the district or outside the district or other training. And I hope to acknowledge them in the future as well.
All right. Well, thank you, Jeremy, and Haley and Jaden. Thank you so much for representing us so well. Clearly, this is so important to us. This is something that we are making a priority in our district. We have established board goals around diversity, equity, inclusivity. So having ambassadors from our student ranks out there representing St. Moriches so well is truly so important to us. So I want to thank you both for doing that fine work.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Congratulations.
So just again, for the board and the public's knowledge, what I intend to do with this particular committee is continue to get our students, Haley and Jaden are both seniors. So what we would like to do is continue this work year by year, and it's going to expand with this group and other opportunities that I'm working on in the county, so that we can specifically get our kids in these positions to learn more, to educate and to advocate. And hopefully over the course of time, we're going to be St. Moriches will be on the forefront of this as far as our students and our staff and our district. So Jaden left, so I can take that off.
All right. Thank you so much, Jeremy. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I'm going to actually just make a slight change here. And maybe Raina, we do have a staff member, that was recognized. And since, you have been so integral in working with International Baccalaureate, and in particular, the Guild of International Baccalaureate Schools, there was a grant awarded. Perhaps you could just talk a little bit about what happened with the grant for one of our staff members.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Good evening, everyone. So last spring, once we were authorized as an IBDP school, it opened up some opportunities with Gibbs. Each year they do mini grants. And basically with your coordinator, any teacher can apply for the grant and explain what their needs are. And especially in the early stages of a program, the needs are significant. So Ali Galafaro, one of our science teachers, worked with Dr. Flynn Trace to get some marine science material for the environmental IB course. She had to write a description, specifically how it would be used in the classroom, how it would be used for the course. And if any one of you have been by our marine science room, It's definitely, it's always a work in progress, always interesting critters to see in those tanks. And it really is an above and beyond job of teachers and support staff to keep that going, because it really does have to be maintained full year. So she did win $500 for that lab, and we're really excited. She's really excited that she can purchase what she needs to build some more marine science and invite more critters into her classroom. So we're very excited about that. And congratulations to Allie and all the effort that she put into it.
Thank you, Raina. And yes, congratulations to Ali Galafaro. That's really great news, and good to see our staff being recognized like that. There was, one other recognition that I would bring up that was shared with us. Mr. Cadraco shared that there was a large portrait honoring Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. that was created by several of our students, and that is going to be different schools will be actually hosting that painting from February 1st through 5th. St. Moriches will host the painting, and then it will be moved to various schools throughout the county, which is really exciting. It's sort of a portable museum, if you will, of artwork. And so we're a part of that. And so I'll congratulate Lila Nicastro, Brennan Weinstein, Dennis Salyov, Emma Smith-Malesso, Grace Mintel, Emmy Offant, Caitlin McCormick, and Katie Marin for their work on creating that piece that's going to be shared throughout the county. So great news from our art department as well. All right. I'm thinking, all right, so we could begin now, I guess, with Carrie, you're going to share your screen and do the budget presentation. Okay, so we are on budget workshop number 2 with regard to our financial planning. And I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Lachlan, who's going to begin that presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
So we're going to kind of jump into the second workshop. If you recall, 2 weeks ago, the administrative team presented kind of where we were and what we're looking to do as we move forward and how we're going to start working on that in the buildings. This presentation is kind of more of long-term planning. We're going to recap what happened last year financially, kind of look at our budget status for the current school year, and then look at long-term planning. One of the board's goals is to do a 4-year plan. And that is something we've been working on the past few weeks. And so we're happy to present that to the community tonight. And then we'll kind of just go through what the budget process is for the 21-22 school year as we now start getting into that moving forward more so in February. So a recap of last year and where we landed. The budget cycle went a little longer than normal due to COVID, and we didn't have the vote until June. So we had a little bit more time to work on the numbers, kind of start projecting out where we were going to end the year. So back in October of this current school year, the board accepted the audited financial statements for the 19-20 school year. And at that point, we met our 4% undesignated fund balance, which is the maximum allowed. Our year end did allow for us to fund the ERS reserve for $247,000. If you remember when we did the budget presentations back in March, April, May of last year, we were applying some reserves into this current school year's budget. We used $739,000 of the ERS reserve, $100,000 of the TRS reserve, and $35,000 of unemployment reserve. And those are for those specific expenses this year. So all in all, once we reapply back the $247,000, we have a net effect on the reserves of $626,000 reduction. So what happened from when we were talking back in May to finally closing out the books at the end of June, which closing the books takes some time. We do work all summer through that process. The actual audit doesn't end until mid-September. And at that point in September, when we were getting ready to close it out for good, we were made aware that the September state aid payment for prior year was going to get withheld 20%. And as a result of that, no one knew at that time when the money was going to be coming back to us. So the auditors were all suggesting to all school districts, not just St. Moriches, is that we have to reclass that as actual recognized revenue into a deferred revenue category. And what that does is when that takes it out of earned revenue in the current year, and when you actually get the payment in years later, you would then recognize it at that point in time. So at that point in time that you actually get the cash, it becomes extra revenue on top of your budget for that particular school year in which it's received. So that was a total of $113,000 that we had to reduce our revenue by at the year end of 2019, 2020. We were working with our transportation contractor at the time for final settlement payment. There were no services being provided. We were providing meal service through buses, as well as providing some drop-offs for materials for students. So we were in the point of time of negotiating what that cost should look like, along with all other districts and their contract companies. So we ended up actually settling slightly over than what we anticipated, and that settlement occurred in July. The revenue shortage, we did see a little bit due to the pandemic. Our interest earnings fell short as the interest rates were declining quickly, and our parentally placed tuition was down. And that's a result of some services to our high need students that are attending private schools. There was a little bit of a pause as to what services they were getting as the private schools were trying to figure that out for virtual services to be provided. So as a result, our revenue was short on that side. On the same side, though, the expenditure was not as high as well as we anticipated, but we did project that we would fully see full funding in that area. We also did have some other projected savings that we were working through the pandemic that we did not see in full, but we were able to provide services to students, mostly our high need students, through virtual tools. So again, the same as the parentally placed, we had a lot of services being provided to students that came to a slight halt until we were able to work through with our providers on how to get that to the students. And we were pleased that we were able to get them to our students in a different way, but it did result in an extra cost to the district. So what are we looking at now for the current school year? As we've stated before, fund balance projections happen on a monthly basis. We start them in about November. At this time of year, they start to get a little bit more in depth because we're now halfway through the school year, so we can kind of start narrowing in our numbers. We work on it monthly. We are doing it based on the information we know at this point in time. These changes are occurring constantly. Our student placement, student needs, our building needs, the current pandemic, all of these things are modifying these numbers almost on a daily basis for us right now. It's important to note the projections are unaudited. I do prepare them with the help of my staff. Dr. Massara and I do go through them to kind of think through what might be missing as we're going through these projections. And some things that we're working with this year, some uncertainties that we have are the virtual learners. We have many students that have chosen to stay virtual. They may come back to be in person and vice versa. Some students that are in person may go virtual. And as a result, that's going to change either services provided to students or some support staff supervision that we need in the buildings, our Chromebook distributions. All of those things are fluctuating right now as we go through this process. Our pandemic needs, the PPE that we're buying almost on a weekly basis, the social distancing requirements that we needed, our cleaning supplies that we need, all just to keep these kids in school and keep them in safe. Our transportation is changing on a daily basis. We cannot fully load the buses as we have in the past. So we're monitoring that very closely. As students start coming more in person, we have to make sure we're maintaining the proper numbers on those buses. If we start seeing more students come in person and riding the buses, we will have to add buses. And again, and our athletics, which we will have a conversation later on about, but as you all know, that is changing almost weekly right now. So as these things are occurring, and these just a few of them, we are monitoring them and changing our projections accordingly. So with regards to the projections, we'll look at the revenue side first. Right now, our tuition that we budgeted for all of our programs, our 811 program, our Native American students, as well as our East Moriches students are all hitting the target. We are coming in on budget for all of those things. Our interest that we budgeted is not going to meet what we had planned. The only hope we can have is that interest rates start going up in the next couple of months and we can start getting that revenue up a little bit higher. Our prior year tuition rates are higher than what we billed originally. So with our East Moriches and Native American student tuition rates, we bill on a prior year rate. Those rates don't come out until December of the next year. As that comes out, we reconcile, and either we owe back or they owe us. And this year it came out that East Moriches actually owes the district a little bit more money. So that becomes extra revenue to the district. State aid that we anticipated is slightly lower due to some changes on our claims, and some of that is occurring as a result of our high cost students. We are just receiving word about 2 weeks ago, we got word that the way we claim some of the expenditures as it relates to these students to get aid on has been changed due to the closure that occurred in the spring. So we are working through that so we can determine finally what that number will be. We hope to have that number within the next month or two. And we also received prior year state aid, the $113,000 I spoke of prior. The state has made us whole on that. So that actually becomes additional revenue to us in this current school year. So on the expense side, though, we're seeing quite a few areas that are saving us money. While we have to keep in mind, we always have the pandemic expenses that we've spent over the summer, the barriers, the PPE, social distancing needs, additional monitors that we needed for temperature taking and to making sure students are following protocol in the buildings. All of those were unbudgeted expenses. But on the other side, we do have significant areas of savings. We have saved in transportation because our athletic programs are running on a lower level than they have in the past. So we don't have as many competitions. Therefore, we don't need the normal transportation we had in the past, as well as some other midday programs that were used to occur during the school day are not running. So therefore, we have about a $200,000 savings in transportation at this point in time. Our co-curricular activities, as many of you know, is slightly lower than what we've offered in the past. We're continuing to monitor this and see what we can do safely and how we can get these programs out to all children in the best way possible. So we are seeing some savings in that area as well. Our program for students with disabilities actually has a significant savings. That's our highest savings right now. It's about $500,000. Some placement changes have occurred since we did the budget back in May. Some students have moved, some students were in one location and moved to a different, which the cost changes on each move that they make, as well as a lot of our students that have remained full virtual don't require some one-to-one staffing that we had to budget for. Again, should any of these things change from now until June, that will change our numbers significantly. So we're monitoring this area because this is our largest either savings or expenditure that we could experience within the budget. The other area that's high cost is our medical benefits to the staff members. We budget about 7% increases. The actual rates that we just got that for January of 2021, they came in less than 2%. So we have a significant savings, about $300,000 savings on our medical savings alone. All other premiums run the actual school calendar year, so we budget those accurately. But with regards to the health insurance, we're seeing some savings in that area. So as we go through this process, what we look at is what's our fiscal stress score. About last week, I think it was, Dr. Massara tweeted out that we will receive no designation. The controller has not formally released this information out yet, but we do have the information. We know we will have no designation for the year end 2020. And based on what we know right now for 2021, we continue to have no designation. You do see the number climb from that 10.0 to 16.7, and that's primarily because of the TAN borrowing. This year we did borrow significantly more, and that was due to the fact that the state was stating that they were going to hold back 20% of our aid, and that's a significant part of our cash flow. So we had to account for not receiving all cash we normally would and go for a higher borrowing. However, given that and given some of the savings that we're seeing on the expenditure side, we anticipate no designation in fiscal stress from the controller at the end of this school year as well. So now that we've looked at last year, we looked at this year, now we start looking at the years beyond that. And what we started doing is a 4-year plan. Keep in mind, the longer you go out, the less accurate your numbers get. We try to project as much as we can. We gather information from all different sources. But our goals here, more the board's goals that we work under, we want to maintain our 4% undesignated fund balance. We want to reduce the applied fund balance, which we have right now is 1.1 million. We want to drop that $100,000 each year, trying to get to at least $800,000, if not lower. Our goal is also to create a capital reserve. This would be at no cost to the taxpayers. And we want to continue to maintain that no designation from the controller year after year as we go forward. So our long-term planning, it really starts with what do we do now? How do we manage this current year's budget, and how do we prep next year's budget? So those are the two key areas that we're looking at. So what we're going to do is kind of just walk through some of the main categories, kind of presenting it in a different way for you. I'm hoping that this maybe helps everyone understand what we're working with, where we're seeing some of the fluctuations occur in the years out. So this is a tax levy projection. Again, it's all projections. This current year we are at 1.65%. We are at 0.67% for the 21-22 school year. And then you can see the years after we're at 2, 3, and 3. The result for the decline this year is the fact that we have lost building aid. Some projects that we had in the past are fully funded at this point in time, but on the same side, our debt has fallen off the books as well. So our capital exclusion is down significantly. In 2023, that levels off, but we also do start taking on the energy performance contract debt, which helps us out a little bit on the tax levy side. Again, these are projections. We use CPI. We slowly increase CPI in the years out as we don't know what that will be. Our tax-based growth factor plays a huge role in this. Last year, it was 1.003, I believe it was, and this year we're at 1.015. So that's all based on the actual construction that's taking place in the area, any property growth, any assessment changes like that. So that, again, is very hard to predict what could happen in the future years. So state aid projections, this is all now, our assumptions on this is we use 2% on after 2021, and that is based on the latest information we've received from the state last week. The governor came out with his budget proposal, and in that there was some adjustments made to it that we're still trying to work through and understand, keeping in mind that what he proposed is the lowest amount proposed. And then that goes to the legislation and they negotiate, and we typically do see higher than what he proposes. So again, we're using 2% on the years beyond 2022. 2021, we did reduce it by the pandemic adjustment, which was $109,000. We also reduced our transportation aid because we knew we were spending less than what we had budgeted. So we knew we would receive less aid than what were on the runs. 2022, we reinstated both of those items because the money was put back in the budget. And then we had to make adjustments beyond that due to the fact that there are still some pandemic adjustments projected in years out. So like I said, we're still working through that and trying to understand it. We're working with all of our organizations to get a clear picture of what that's going to look like. The state, most of our organizations are kind of pre-warning everybody that we may be revisiting where we were back in 2009-10 with the GEA. The gap elimination adjustment, for those that don't know what that stands for, where there was a significant reduction to state aid and it was very slowly put back into school districts until they were made whole years later. So again, we're working through these numbers. These are rough numbers at this point in time with the information we know. So on the expenditure side, you can see salaries are increasing. They're increasing based on what our collective bargaining agreements are settled at this point in time. We do assume some retirements starting next year. Not that we're retiring anybody and not replacing them, it's retiring and replacing with lower salaries. So based on information we have from the retirement system and just looking at our staffing, we make some assumptions as to how many people we think may or may not retire. And it helps us kind of come up with some projection numbers at that time. So total benefits. Now this is not just health insurance. As you can see over on the right, that explains every piece of benefit that's included in these numbers. With regards to health insurance is our largest cost in this area. We are projecting 7% on all years out. Our concern, while we've been only seeing less than a 2% increase the past 2 or 3 years, our concern is the current pandemic. At some point in time, all of these medical expenses are going to hurt the insurance agencies, and they're going to start seeing an increase in premiums. Premiums used to increase anywhere from 18 to 25% in years past. We've not seen those increases in many, many years. So we're hopeful that only showing a 7% increase, while it hurts us, obviously, because we are seeing increases significantly due to how many staff members we have, we're hopeful that it comes in less than that as we move forward. We've been asking for projections from our provider. They've not provided any information. We've been working through some conferences asking, and at this point, there's no projections being given out from the insurance industry at all with where these rates are going to land in the next 2 to 3 years. So into fund transfers, while we typically don't talk about this through the budget process, because it usually is, it's a very small, on a $44 million budget, it's $90,000 on it. What I wanted to show you here is we borrowed $211,000 from our reserves. Our liability reserve this year in September, we took money from in order to purchase Chromebooks, and we have to pay that back. Underneath the law, that was allowed. The board passed resolution. Part of that resolution and part of the law is within 5 years, you have to pay back that plus interest. So it's just over $45,000 a year that we need to now budget for and pay back the reserve in full by year 5. So just wanted to show and remind the community and the board that this is what's taking place in this particular area. It's a non-negotiable. Our long-term debt, this relates to the tax levy. You can see this current school year, we have $2.9 million in debt. Next year, we only have $1.4 million in debt, and it kind of levels out. The increase that you see is just due to the energy performance contract, but we do start seeing savings on the expenditure sides as a result of that to net this in the end. So just to show, we are retiring debt in 2021-22 school year, and we will start picking up the EPC as well. So this is now just a summary. You can see the green line is the expenditures, the blue is the revenue. Our revenues are not keeping up with the expenses, with our state aid only increasing about 2%. Our CPI is not reaching 2%, and our cost of benefits and contractual obligations are well above 2%. So you can see that our expenditures are continuing to outpace our revenues. You know, this is what we're looking at now. The admin team is meeting. We've been talking. We've been trying to figure out now, how do we do this? We need to close this gap and move forward. So, you know, going back to fiscal stress scores, what do we do now? We see that our revenues are not keeping up with expenditures. What's going to happen with our fiscal stress? You know, unfortunately, the chart, the information that we get, you can't move this out too many years. So we were able to project out what does the end of next school year look like. We believe we will again be in no designation. That is all things constant right now, that we should be okay for next school year. Again, the years after that, it's hard to manipulate these charts to kind of get that information out. The controller only provides a 2-year trend on this. So we're working through to try to see if we can get the point structure and figure out where it looks at with all the other data that we just presented. So in order to maintain now a balanced budget going forward, these are different things that we're talking about, things that we're looking at. We're looking at the tuition programs that we have in district. How do we start increasing enrollment in those areas? How do we maximize efficiencies within transportation? We have to go out to bid for a new transportation provider next year. Our contract was sold this year. We have this year and next year left on that particular bid. And then by law, because it was sold, we do have to RFP that out. So with that, though, it provides an opportunity to take a look at transportation as a whole, and maybe we could start seeing some savings in other areas and get creative in that particular area of expense. We're going to start reviewing support staff needs district-wide as enrollment changes, as need changes, as we're, you know, doing more things within the computer. Are there more efficiencies to be had? So those are different areas we're looking at. We're looking at shared services for contractual savings. This year alone, we entered into agreements with Suffolk County for fuel for our cars, and we're also looking at it now for our buildings. We're continuing to evaluate enrollment trends for our staffing needs, not only our enrollment, but we're looking at the enrollment from East Moriches. We're looking at the population on the reservation to see where are our numbers going and what is that going to do with regards to our staffing K-12. And we're also taking a close examination of all of our elective offerings. Are we able to maintain them all? Can we add some? Can we move some around? Making sure that we keep all of our programs intact that we currently offer is our goal. And, you know, that's a priority of ours. So that's why that's at the bottom of the list, because we want to make sure we can keep those things in place. And we're going to look at other things that will have the least impact to children prior to making any changes within the curriculum itself. So now we bring it back a little bit closer to reality, to what today is. We're starting the budget process for 21-22. As I said, this is now the budget workshop number 2. We will do a budget workshop each month to give updates to the community where we stand. So we started this process though back in November, and we started gathering information with the principals. They started preparing their building level budgets. We started working on the salaries for all the current staff and their CBAs, entering all that into the system. We're reviewing student placements and projections for next year. I'm working with the special education department closely to make sure we have all those kids in the right spots, and we're estimating out what their cost would be. We're reviewing tuition students for continuing 21-22, both in our 811 program, our East Moriches students, to see what we think we might be getting moving in. We're looking at the enrollment, our enrollment projections that we received last year from Eastern Suffolk BOCES, and aging out our seniors, projecting what our incoming kindergartners are. We're updating our benefits with the new rates as they start coming in. We're reviewing all of our contracts. We're going through RFP processes now so that we can lock in numbers prior to settling the budget. And we're also looking at all of our BOCES expenditures to determine what needs we have. A lot of this has changed within BOCES because we went a lot virtual this year, and we actually signed on for a lot of services we have not in the past, but we're also not using services that we have in the past. So this year becomes a critical year to take a close look at what are we using, what do we need to continue to use, or do we not need anymore when we go back to normal, and maybe how can we start making some adjustments in the instructional area with regards to our BOCES services. So with the budget development, this is kind of the month-to-month process starting this month. We prepared the tax cap calculation already. I actually just submitted it yesterday. We're reviewing preliminary state aid runs that we just received last week. So those are two key things that happened in January. Now in February, we're finalizing the calculation. Numbers are not changing any longer, so we've actually finalized it at this point in time. We're going to start getting a close dive into the projected enrollment and staffing with the admin team, with all the buildings and the principals, looking at what their scheduling looks like. We're going to review buildings and grounds budgets. We start comparing that to 3-year trends to get a better basis as to what we should be budgeting for that. In March, we start locking in our numbers for tuition projections. We finalize our staffing and we finalize our BOCES budget. BOCES doesn't release their budget until mid-February, so it takes some time to go through that. In April, we lock all our projections in, the board adopts the budget, and we file the property tax report card. So then in May, we will have our budget hearing and the annual budget vote. Again, this is as long as everything stays on task. As you know, last year, we kind of got a little deterred from all of this process, but we are hopeful that everything remains normal this year. So this is just a quick recap of now the presentations we'll be providing at the board meetings. Like I said, once a month, we'll be giving some budget updates. The next board meeting, February 10th, the admin, Mrs. Ingoli and I will present on the administrative budget as well as the capital budget, which is our buildings and grounds unit. We'll start getting a little bit into the revenue side of things, the preliminary numbers that we're looking at already. March, our administrative team as a whole will present the program budgets, enrollment projections, staffings, what offerings they're going to have. And we'll also kind of revisit the revenue if any changes have occurred from February until that point in time. And then in April, we tend to lock in that budget at that last meeting. If in between we have board meetings and things change significantly, further conversations need to be had, we will add a workshop in. But April 14th, we are set to adopt the final budget and the property tax report card. May 5th is the budget hearing, and May 18th is the annual budget vote. Any questions from the board?
I do not, Carrie. Thank you.
Carrie, can you just go back to slide 13? I do have just one question. I think it was 13.
State aid?
Yeah.
Yep.
Is this, so this is, this is like when we saw Newsday just come out this past week, and some of us, I want to vomit, I think. This is what we're talking about right here. And this is what we're digging into.
Right, Newsday showed an 8% reduction in state aid, and it is correct. We have a reduction in state aid because we lost building aid. We did not, our foundation aid is flat. All of our aids have pretty much remained flat, and our expense-based aids have slightly increased, but we lost just over $1 million in building aid, which causes on paper, when you take the two numbers, an 8% decline. So, you know, there's also kind of some talk about a pandemic adjustment happening, that he added star payments in to the calculation also. Everyone's trying to analyze why. It's never been presented on state aid runs before. It's not state aid. The STAR is part of the property tax levy. The state takes on that expense on behalf of the property tax owners. So it kind of made the runs a little confusing. However, we do have a decline, and that is primarily because building aid has been made whole for certain projects. And that's about just over $1 million.
Building aid for,
I'd have to look at what years it was exactly. I don't know off the top of my head. We have a document that we track all of our building aid. We knew this was happening. We did talk about it last year. You know, so it wasn't really a surprise when the runs came out, at least not to me. I do follow it closely though. So like I said, we do have a spreadsheet. We do keep track of this. We presented it in public before that we were going to see the reduction in aid, which would hurt our tax levy in the end. But we also don't have that expense either. So the expense we had for the debt that was offset by the building aid, both of those are gone. But when you look at the state aid numbers, you have an 8% decline in state aid. It is certainly an eye opener, but
Yeah.
it is primarily and only due to building aid loss. And the only way to recoup that is to do a capital project and gain more building aid.
okay.
Carrie, where are we on the energy performance contract? Are we on target to start this summer?
I think our goal is late spring, correct, Raina?
Yes, waiting for approvals.
So based on that information that we received while we were doing this, I've been working with our fiscal advisors to get projected borrowing schedules out. So that, because that becomes part of our tax levy calculation, part of the budget, we would start taking payments on late next year. February, I think, would be our first payment. And then we wouldn't start seeing building aid flow for the project until the project's complete. So if we start in spring, we finish by end of next year, we would start seeing building aid in the 2023 school year.
23?
Yes.
Now, do you know, Raina, are they starting with the solar, or are they starting with the BMS and lighting? Do you know what phases they're starting with first?
I don't know exactly what they're starting with. I think it will also depend on the timing of it, you know, what's going on in the buildings. Obviously, the most invasive pieces will get done over the summer.
Okay. And one last.
But I can get a timeline of the work for sure.
Great, thanks. Carrie, do you have a number since like July of what we've spent for COVID do you have like a spreadsheet? Do you have like a running tab of what we're at?
Yeah, we've created codes specific for it. So we're tracking all those expenses in specific budget line items, just so that we can say at the end of the year, what did we spend? Off the top of my head, I don't have the number.
Can you
but
forward us the next update?
100,000, but I can certainly give in the next update, I can send to the board what that number is
Yeah.
at this point in time.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Carrie, the guaranteed savings from the EPC projects, do
Yes.
they show up here?
Yes, we have them reflected in the expenditures. It would be in the contractual. It's actually not in any of these particular slides, but it is reflected in this long-term plan here, this slide. So our contractual expenses would be going down, our electricity, or like the utility expenses are anticipated to go down, which between that and the building aid, the borrowing of the EPC is at no cost to the district.
Right. Okay.
So yes, we made sure we reflected all of that within this.
Carrie,
Starting in 2023? It starts in 2023?
Yes.
Carrie, can we just go back again? I'm sorry, to the slide 13. I just want to, so we're going to get less aid because the building aid fell off. Is it going to be basically a wash, or because we're not spending it anymore? Is it close to a wash, do we think?
You mean the debt expense versus
Yeah.
Yes.
It's just.
And you
this
said the
one
only way to
transition
counter
year.
that. Sorry. Come on.
It's just this one transition year that it looks bad, right?
Correct. And that, so you can see in 22, 23, it goes up a little bit, and that's because we start seeing the EPC aid kick in. The only thing which, like I said, we're working through is whether or not the governor reduces due to the pandemic and due to shortfalls in his budget. His current budget does not reflect any increases. So if anybody listened to his presentation, he talked about $6 billion from the federal government or 15 billion. Our runs are based on the federal money he got back in December. So this current school year, there's no reduction in state aid. We will be made whole by June 30th. There's no cash holdback. We're going to get 100% of our monies. What he's already held back cash wise, we'll get by March 31st. So by June, we will be made whole for a current school year. Next year, we don't anticipate a reduction under current situation that he's proposed. He's also stating if he gets 6 billion, there's no impact on schools. If he gets 15 billion, we could potentially see an additional stimulus maybe, or some type of a one-time help into next school year. Again, legislation is going through this now. They're negotiating the budget. We typically do see a slight increase in revenue on state aid as a result of their negotiations. So we're waiting for that to come through. We don't get those numbers until April 1st, unfortunately. But, you know, like Dr. Massara said, organizations start having their advocacy meetings and starting meeting with the legislators. So we kind of start getting a little bit of inclination if we'll see an increase or not. So the 15 billion, if we get it would be a one-time funding source. However, this year, the money he's backfilling the December money could become a permanent reduction in years out. That we don't know at this point in time. And for us, that could be upwards of $1.4 million.
Carrie, another question on slide 18, the summary. So you show the fund balances slowly decreasing.
Right, so that's just a natural progression because your revenues are outpacing your expenses. So, you know, the way the system works is then it's saying, okay, well, you're eating away at your reserves as a result of that. How else are you going to fund the expenses except for using your reserves? So,
Right.
Which is why I said, you know, right now is the time in administration, we're looking at this closely and saying, we can't have that. We can't rely on our reserves because they're not going to be there forever. So our goal is to say, okay, how do we maintain this and how do we have our revenues meet our expenditures or vice versa?
Right. Now, certain of those reserves, there's a mandated minimum. Is that right?
No, there's no mandated minimum. And unfortunately, through past experience of mine, learning the hard way, schools can't go bankrupt either.
Right.
It's not possible. You always find a way out. I've seen fiscal cliffs occur and you find your way out. You work hard, you work diligently. There's some things that happen in your favor. Like I said, this is 4 years out. Anybody that does projections, the further you get out, the least accurate it gets. You never know what could happen. And unfortunately, current times that we're working in, it makes it even that much harder.
Sure.
I have a question.
Mhm.
So you said by June we should be made whole from by the end of the year we should be made whole our budget. So do we have a projected savings or no?
Based for the fund balance at the end of this year? Yeah. So we anticipate right now, all things remain the same. And like I said, these numbers are changing daily because my original projections last week had a significant athletic savings because we weren't running certain sports. That changed. So yesterday we
Okay.
were, making modifications to this because all of that changed. And anything, there are certain things that could cause big swings in this. So yes, we anticipate meeting the 4% undesignated fund balance. We also anticipate paying back the reserves that we borrowed, the ERS, the TRS, and the unemployment. We do anticipate maybe having slightly more, not too much more, in order to pay it back. We may or may not have a little bit more. So those are the numbers we're watching closely. Like I said, the categories I showed, the four expense categories, those are the key players that could really swing our numbers significantly. So, we will monitor, we'll keep the board and the public up to date monthly. Anything significant that may change, we'll let you know what's occurring and why the change happened. So that way we know in planning our budget for 21-22, what we could possibly use for reserves to assist us next year or not.
Thank you.
Mary, I think you just answered my question, but if we go back to slide 3, I think you just answered it. You're saying that the ERS, TRS, and unemployment, that's 626,785 is what we're hoping to also be able to pay back?
Correct.
Awesome, okay. Okay. In addition to the 1.1 was applied
1.1.
this year?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
great.
If that is all, I will turn it back over to Dr. Massera.
Okay, thank you very much, Carrie.
No problem.
All right, so, one of the other topics that, I think I'll just kind of swing to, and we'll go slightly out of order. On Friday, when we were, we send the agenda out to the board on Fridays, and we didn't have a public conversation on athletics scheduled. We sent out an agenda, and then somewhere around 3 o'clock, the governor made an announcement that high-risk sports could play if they were going to be permitted to by local health departments. That started a very busy weekend. I could tell you I had pretty robust conversation with the county executive's office, Section 11, the governing body for athletics in Suffolk County, high school athletics in Suffolk County, and the health department, in order to really try to come up with a plan for a safe return to play if in fact Suffolk County would move toward opening of high-risk sports. And so on Monday, the county executive held a press conference, and I was there with him in Blydenburg Park, as well as Tom Combs from Section 11, to announce that high-risk sports would run this year. And high-risk sports being basketball for the winter season, being basketball, boys and girls, competitive cheerleading, and wrestling. And all of those sports, according to the governor, could run. And we followed on the 25th. New York State Public High School Athletic Association modified their return to play guidelines. Section 11 issued their guidelines, and essentially came up with a plan for return for the safe return to play for high-risk sports. Part of the plan, and if you saw the press conference with Steve Ballone, is the backbone of the plan is mandatory testing for athletes once a week. And they believe that although, we are basically creating a situation that is less controllable in terms of contact tracing, mixing cohorts and things like that, with the return to play for athletics, that one of the mitigating factors that we could utilize is mandatory testing once a week. That therefore is a non-negotiable for athletes that want to play. They will need to test once a week, and we have we're pretty solid on our plan. As I've told the board in the past, I was a part of developing and created a plan for school-based testing that was the model for the state. And Suffolk County is now the first county in the state to mandate COVID testing for student athletes in high-risk sports. So I did this weekend, spent significant time, and will be pushing out a plan in the county for testing for athletes as well. I'm going to invite Mr. Thode to join us, and if he's back in, Jeremy Thode, as you know, is our interim principal, but he has also been our athletic director for many years. Jeremy is a leader in the county, and we rely on him for his expertise. And certainly Jeremy and I spent significant conversation, and he is well aware of what the guidelines are. There are some unfortunate pieces in this that we really do not have control over. One of those is that there will not be, parents will not be permitted to attend athletic contests in Suffolk County. Now, we did anticipate that was a possibility all the way back in the summer when we were planning, and we were not sure if sports were going to open, and we will be prepared to live stream all of our athletic events. But I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy And then I will be able to, answer any questions, and Jeremy can answer some questions. But certainly we want to assure our community that everything we're going to do is going to be done in a way that is as safe as possible for our student athletes and for our general population of students, because we do not take our responsibility lightly. So Jeremy, I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Yeah, so just as Dr. Massera explained, we've been working, he and I have been speaking over days and days. But I do need everybody to understand that Section 11 has been working on return to play protocols for a while now. In fact, I'm part of a task force that has been working on this because we anticipated the possibility that the governor was going to allow us to play sports in January, which has then put on pause. So we had working documents in place. New York State Public High School Athletic Association has a 78-page document that covers all sports. That all the athletic directors have just recently got the most updated version. Our Suffolk County document is more restrictive, with the understanding that we're trying to do everything we can to keep kids safe, if we're successful in getting this off the ground and moving, which so far we have with low risk sports like winter track. We will, we're ready to go is really ultimately what the situation is with this task force and all the information that we've worked on. The problem has been that all of a sudden the governor gave us a week. The governor kind of allowed the Department of Health to decide whether we were going to have sports, and then we just found out, and we have a week to get ready. So it's not the preparation of keeping kids safe that's the issue right now. The issue is all the specifics about testing, how to test, when to test, how to get the documentation, the parent approval for the testing, and so forth and so on. So we are working very, very hard right now on that and figuring out what's the best way that works for Center Moriches. And it is going to vary, and it is varying depending on the schools, because I'm in constant contact with all of my colleagues in the athletic world. But ultimately, I think we have a great plan that is shaped up, and we're going to be finalizing over the course of the next couple of days before we start on Monday. It is quite honestly, as a principal and as an athletic director, it's very conflicting. And in fact, honestly, it's contradicting because we have CDC guidelines for what we have to do in school, which is very specific, and we're going to keep kids safe, and we're going to continue to follow those guidelines. And then now we have an athletic guidelines that doesn't jive well, does not mesh specifically. So ultimately, the X factor is the testing. Athletics is an option. Students do not have to do it, but you have to test, as Dr. Massera said, you have to test weekly if you want to play. So that will give us a little bit more security in making sure that we know kids are healthy. I do believe, because I actually, we did begin open gym this week for basketball, just so that they, kind of got back in the realm and we can kind of practice some of these safety things that we're expected to do on a daily basis. And what I am hoping that will happen with our high-risk sports coming back in is kids are going to take safety more seriously, not only in school or on the court, but also at home, because unfortunately last year we lost sports, and they know what that feels like. And so now we have a little bit more help with them being more careful on the weekends and when they're outside of home. So I literally just had a conversation a half hour ago, well, 45 minutes ago, whatever it was, with the kids about, listen, we have to go above and beyond to stay safe. So, I'm hoping that will happen with this now having this carrot of having sports back. So we do plan to use the nurse to do our testing. I think our preliminary plan, and Dr. Massera and I are still working on this with Mr. Soto, is that we will do testing on their in-person days. So it's not going to be an extra burden, an extra time on a weekend or at night for either the nurses, the parents, the students, and so forth and so on. We'll utilize the days that they're in school on their off periods, lunch, study hall, right before school, right after ninth period. However, we have to figure it out. And obviously we'll have their rosters, And those kids that are 100% virtual who are allowed to play as per New York State will have to schedule appointments. It's no different than what we've done for school pictures and other different things that virtual kids, obviously not being in school, aren't able to do in our normal bell schedule. So that's how we'll do the testing. We will follow all safety protocols that we've been following in school while we're in the gym. Just a couple of pointers, just so everybody's understands how we're going to operate. We plan to try not to use the locker rooms. And the reason we don't want to do this is because contact tracing in a locker room is a lot more difficult. We don't know what kids are doing. We can't necessarily, for a lot of different reasons, have adults in there watching kids get dressed and undressed and so forth and so on. So we want to try to avoid that. If we do have to use the locker rooms, it would be kind of a one at a time type thing. But what we're planning on doing, which is what we are doing for winter track, is 10th period. We now have, we've progressed with allowing students to stay in person for extra help over the last few weeks, as you know. And so we're allowing people to go to extra help like normal 10th period. And if they don't go to an extra help and they're playing track, they are in the cafeteria doing homework or whatever else, and they're getting changed in the gang bathrooms of the cafeteria. So we plan to use that model. We are also, as you know, just started allowing students on request to use their hallway lockers. So that will be another option for athletes or any of our students, should they have their winter jackets or too many books or whatever else. We are doing it as needed, as requested. A lot of the kids are functioning pretty well without them, and we prefer that just because it's less things that are touching the walls and less congregating in the hallways and things like that. But we have those things in place moving forward with athletics. If you're not aware, the students all have to sign a pledge from Suffolk County that they've adopted, and we're going to have that available. We actually do have it available. That will be, first of all, it's already put in the family ID where they register online, but a lot of our athletes already registered online. So we either have to get them to go back and sign in for that, or I think for this season, just for ease and not making it more of a cumbersome process for the parents, I'm just going to have the students sign a hard copy for this particular season. But that's still, again, under review of how we're going to operate. So they have to do the pledge. Parents have to sign off on a testing release that will be available. We're going to get that to the kids this week so that we have it for Monday. We don't have to test right away. We have until the first game, before the first game. So we don't have to test on Monday. We have to wait till we get the tests, which I know are in process with the state. I believe we have to pick them up, Dr. Massara, shortly. But we have until the first game. So the plan is to do that, later next week before our first game, which will be on Sunday of next week. The season is a month long. There is basically 6 days of practice for basketball. Obviously, cheerleading follows that because cheerleaders will cheer at the basketball game, and wrestling follows a similar process. So we have six days of practice, and then we have 3 weeks of competition, which is basically for basketball, 3 games a week with practices in between. Every day they come to practice, they have to get their temperature checked. So if I'm in person, I got my temperature checked in the morning. We're still going to temperature check them before they actually start practicing, just good practice. And then anybody who's virtual on that particular day, whether they're on the off cohort or 100% virtual, and they come into the gym at the end of the day, they'll get their temperature checked as well. We will contact trace. So right now, again, using our practice model of open gym, kids are either being signed in or signing in themselves on a practice by practice basis, so that the coaches know who is there should we have to contact trace. And then we are working on protocols. In fact, again, I had the conversation with the basketball team and the coaches tonight of how we can avoid as much as possible the students being in close contact during a practice on any given day. We have parameters that we have to follow that tells us if it's a close contact. Obviously, when they're playing in the game, in a scrimmage or a game, they're in close contact. But I just explained to them, hey, when you're on the court, let me go back. Mask wearing is necessary at all times when there's no activity. When you're on the bench, when you're standing around, when you're doing nothing, coming in and out of the gym or whatever else, But as far as competition or practice, like a scrimmage, the rules are that it's as tolerable. So if a student has problem wearing a mask while they're running up and down the court, they do not have to wear it. That is the guides. It's not great. So I went through the process with them saying, listen, we're going to try to wear them as often as possible, all the time, if you can tolerate it. If you can't, while we're running up and down, sprinting back and forth, when play stops, when the ball's out of bounds, when we're taking free throws, when you have a timeout in wrestling, whatever the case may be, we want you to put it on just as an extra security. Is it false sense of security? I don't know. But the bottom line is the more we can keep them protected, the better it is. And we're going to continue to follow those protocols. Ultimately, again, it's a conflict for me as the principal. And I think all of us here on the Zoom, all the parents out there, we want kids in school more, whatever that looks like. And we're going to continue to look at ways and options that we're going to allow this. Right now, athletics was given to us. It's a great thing for kids to have something to belong to. Again, I struggle a little bit with the conflict of the safety, but we're going to follow the safety rules, to the T. But we still have to continue to find ways to get kids more in interacting and doing what we can. And we're going to do that following the safety protocols. Hopefully, maybe this is my thought, just logically, is the governor has allowed this, the Department of Health has allowed this. Well, maybe the CDC and maybe the rules that come forward will loosen because this is happening and it's happening successfully. I don't know. That's my hope. But bottom line is we're going to follow the rules for school. We're going to follow the rules for athletics. The only huge difference is that the students are being mandatory tested. It is being provided by the county for free of charge. There's going to be very little cost to the district as far as doing what we're doing, additional costs. And we're hoping it's going to, be another step forward for kids to get some normalcy and so forth. As far as the parents, I've already fielded a bunch of calls about the spectators. Again, trying to limit the amount of people in the gym, on the fields or wherever. It's not ideal, especially for our seniors. I get that as an athletic director, I get it as a parent, as a principal, but we're going to start this way. I want to point out that moving forward into the fall or spring season, should this continue in a positive way, it's not absolutely unsure that we will not allow spectators in the beginning, but right now for the winter season, indoors, not being able to ventilate and so forth, we're going to be no spectators. That was a Section 11 voted on policy, again, in the best interest of trying to get the kids back into the gym, playing the sports, and watching the girls and the boys the last couple of days, watching track over the last couple of weeks. There's a pep in some steps. There's some positivity, and that's a good thing.
All right, thank you, Jeremy, and yeah, I would reiterate that this is something that we believe if we follow the protocols, we can keep kids as safe as possible given the additional risk of running sports. Clearly, the CDC recognizes that the mental health of kids is important. And so, recently there's been conversation about saying that, and recognition from the CDC that schools are safe, but the important point about what the CDC's recent statement is, and again, I'll quote from an article that I just kind of pulled up, and it says the agency said the preponderance of available evidence indicated that in-person instruction could be carried out safely as long as mask wearing and social distancing were maintained. And so the CDC, although they're saying they'd like to see kids in person for the mental health benefits, they are clearly standing by the social distancing requirements. So that really needs to be said. And the other thing, in that same CDC recommendation, which is contrary to where we're headed, their recommendation is that indoor sports not run, believe it or not. So, we're doing this. We have the green light from the governor's office, from our local health department, and we're going to use all of those, mitigating factors we can to ensure the safety of our kids so that they can play sports, enjoy the things that they love to do, but do so in as safe a manner as possible. We are taking additional precautions So for instance, there are smaller groups, like, in practice, there are ways to create smaller groups in practices as opposed to having whole teams. So for instance, age groups in wrestling will be separated. The lighter weight groups will start in the beginning of practice, the heavier weight groups at the end of practice, and the kids will only wrestle with those closest to their weight group. So for instance, they might only have close interactions with 2 or 3. So if there was a positive case, the likelihood of transmission may be much higher, significantly, in fact. However, the amount of spread would be minimized because there would only be a couple of people in contact. So, that is quite different in a setting. I mean, we saw 2 quarantines today, one in our elementary school, in an elementary classroom that had to be quarantined. And again, because of closer proximity and full day in school. And we also did see, 3 students get quarantined in our secondary as close contact. So, there is fear that with greater density, there would be greater quarantines. And so we are cognizant of that, and we are ensuring that with the opening of athletics, we are also stepping up our contact tracing, our ability to contact trace in those kinds of settings. So I'd be
Sarah, can I just add to what you said? Also, just so everybody's aware, there also are restrictions that Section 11 Suffolk County is putting in as far as the size of teams. Again, it's just another possible way to kind of limit, amount of kids sitting around or interacting, whatever else. But I do want to point out specifically, just in case we weren't clear or just anybody's confused, that the testing is only for high risk sports. So for the winter, that is, again, like Dr. Sarah said, is basketball, wrestling, and competitive cheer. We don't have competitive cheer, we have sideline cheer, but if they're stunting or tumbling, then they would be considered high risk. So they would have to test as well. For the fall sports, it would be volleyball and football. And for the spring sport, it would be boys lacrosse. All other sports are either considered moderate or low risk. So those students would not have to test. I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea that they don't sign the pledge, just as another thing of safety and awareness, but they don't have to test.
Jeremy, they waived the amount of practices before you need to play, correct? They waived that this year, right? Normally you have to have a certain amount of practices.
No, the basketball has to have 6, so they have to practice Monday through Saturday, and they can technically play on Sunday. What they did is they allowed Sunday now as a day, so basically they're saying get your practices in, going right into the season. It's
And what about physicals for parents? The physicals, school physicals?
So physicals, the physicals, and Mr. Soto or Dr. Sarah, just if I'm wrong here, they're accepting physicals over the last 2 years. If you've had them over the last 2 years and you don't have a current one because of COVID related, I couldn't get to my doctor is not open, whatever else, there is the ability. So we don't have any issue with our athletes being physical. They all either have already registered on Family ID, or they're in the process of it. Most of them are already approved. I'm going to be using the next 2 days with Mr. Kaczynski and staff to make sure we have everybody, ultimately this is in a lot of ways a great thing. And we don't want to exclude anybody if we don't need to. So we're going to work what we can to make sure we get everybody cleared appropriately and let them get, again, some normalcy and some connectivity.
Great, thanks.
And any other questions from the board? Okay, we had, one other, the other thing that came up at the last board meeting was, the discussion about, the possibility of examining, what people's interests might be with regard to, wanting to attend in person in our secondary, in our high school from grade 6 through 12 in person. If we were to try to open up. So Raina, if Bill, if you could make Raina, do you have it up or do you need me to put it up? Do you need me to put it up, Raina? Just let me know, or do you have it? And then we can make you a host. You just have to unmute.
I have it.
Oh, you do? Okay. So Bill, if you could, can you present, can you share your screen from where you're at? So Raina
I
has a
just,
presentation. We've put up a survey on, on reopening and in-person preferences. And so, Raina has that, and I'll ask you to put that up.
okay, let me just, all right. You guys see my screen?
Yep, perfect.
Yes.
Okay. So we put out a survey, a very brief survey as suggested at the last BOE meeting. Thank you for everyone that responded. We got a solid response. I know a lot of people were involved in pushing this out in a variety of different ways. So thank you for getting that out. Even though we did have a solid response, this chart just represents our 6 to 12 total is 901. And this is the blue represents, we had 60% out of that respond, and we're still, the survey is still open. So we still have a somewhat of an incomplete data set there because we have about 40% that we have not received responses one way or the other yet on that. So this really, aside from the, what, your demographic information, this was the essence, this was the question of in the survey. So we have 84%, 84.7% said that they would send their children to school, grades 6 through 12, if we were to combine the cohorts and implemented 5 days a week of in-person instruction for grades 6 through 12. Definitely an overwhelming response in terms of what people want and what people are, families are looking for in those grade levels. Our challenge, of course, is that if, we were to move, to a model, an in-person model for 5 days a week, we would be forsaking, the health and safety guidelines established by the CDC, that Jeremy is talking about, and that conflict that we're currently in right now. Would be, next to impossible if we were to have 85% of our population in 5 days a week to socially distance properly according to the CDC guidelines. This is just the responses by grade, the actual numbers of students who responded, families that responded per student, and the percentage, the overall percentage out of the responses. And this next chart that we've had this information, this is the enrollment breakdown for in-person and remote learning. So we took the 84%, 85% in-person survey, interest survey information, and then looked at this chart and compared it. So if you look at the middle school and high school, clearly there's a correlation of people, and not necessarily the same, likely the same people like that who are currently in school, is hovering around that 80% with middle school and high school, and correlate that with the 85% of people that would be interested or would send their children to school if we had in-person school 5 days a week. So this is just a point of reference. This is current as of January for the district. So just as a point of reference in terms of where we are with in-person learning.
So yeah, and I think that what we're seeing is that those numbers are, so because when you only have 60% response rate, you try to extrapolate and say, well, what does that really mean? But when we compare it to our actual enrollment and those choosing in person, we're seeing the same numbers. So we're anticipating that, and we have to say that, well, then we can potentially, we can be 90% sure that we can rely on that. If we did try to open up, that we would have about 85%, 84-85% would return in person full time. As we've said in the past, that's the part that's problematic for us, because we're well over the tipping point where we would be able to bring kids back and socially distance appropriately in our buildings that are at 91 and 93% capacity in the middle school and high school. So, that's kind of where we're at. with that. It's, it's a challenge, right now. I think that, for many kids, the thought that they're going to be able to play their sport is a win right now, and something that they're very happy to be able to do. But I think we still need to, I would say, I'm really not somebody that's willing to forsake the CDC guidance in terms of the social distancing in a recommendation. So certainly, I think that what we want to continue to do, as you know, Suffolk County is still, yesterday was 8.1% infection rate, one of the highest in the entire state. And we do have, this weekend, we had 4 confirmed cases of the new European variant of COVID. And one of those was in a 17-year-old student. And so, we're seeing double-digit deaths in Suffolk County. I think we need to, be patient here, continue to monitor the data. If we see things, infection rates start to drop off and things start to change, we can continue to have the conversation. And if we can, get to a point where potentially we can be very creative, as Jeremy had indicated, taking a look at some of the seniors, looking at some of that space, and and actually the use of athletics, including athletics, causes us in some ways to lose some of the extra instructional space that we would have otherwise used, especially during the winter. In the spring, when we can get outside, potentially we can reclaim, and we're not running basketball in the indoor sports, potentially we can reclaim some of those spaces and use those as remote learning environments for kids if we were to increase capacity. Raina, any other thoughts on that?
No, I think we're good. I think it's just, looking at the, just basically echoing what Jeremy said and what, we've saying, we keep, this is a conversation that happens every single day among the administrative team, among the teachers, with the teachers union as well, in terms of how do we move forward and, give as full as an experience as we can and follow all the guidelines, imparted on us is incredibly challenging. And, just like we saw with athletics, things seem to change very quickly now. So, we're gonna, continue to look at things and watch how the guidance changes and keep moving forward as best we can.
Okay. And at the end of the day, that the health and safety of our students and our staff clearly always has to be at the forefront.
Dr. Massara, can I just jump in real quick?
Certainly, Jeremy. Thank you.
Just again, I just want to reiterate, and again, I've had this conversation with Dr. Massara and Raina and Marissa. Ultimately, our goal is to find ways to get kids in more. I am, again, as I'll just reiterate, I am hopeful that this athletic opportunity will give us some more insight, give us some more abilities to see what else we can do. Whether it's through robotics or music, other clubs, they're all steps in the right direction in my mind. My priority is and will be certainly seniors first. Trying to figure out if there's ways that we can do more for them, and certainly want to celebrate all the things that we were not able to celebrate last year at the end of the year. So, there are some creative things that we're going to continue to talk about. In fact, we talk after every board meeting, so we're going to meet tomorrow. And again, using some of those alternate locations, at least to get them in the building and possibly have remote opportunities that, because we can't fit them in the classrooms, is something that we can consider. But we have to, be creative, but also be safe and follow these guidelines. So, I'm committed to continuing the conversation and being that, being as creative as possible with a focus on the seniors first. And then, little by little, hopefully we'll find more solutions. So.
Thank you, Jeremy. Anyone from the board? Otherwise, we can move into the questions and comments. Mr. Maxwell.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, Ron, so last time, I think Kerry presented some costs associated with split sessions, which would be I guess one way to maintain the social distancing and yet still get everyone back in school. So, aside from the level of those costs and whether or not we would even consider those as reasonable, I think if you do split sessions, that would then essentially preclude running sports after school. Has that been given thought so far?
Certainly, athletes wouldn't be able to participate in the later sessions.
I have a question for Jeremy. About the sports cap.
Yep.
What was the cap?
Yeah, so what we're being told is the cap for the sport teams will be 20. And I believe, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe it's 20 including the coaches. I don't think it's going to be a major issue with most of the sports. It may be with one team, but we're still waiting on the numbers. I think from a safety perspective, we're going to have less. But the other piece to it that's a safety thing is that we know that when we have games, we're not going to have more than 20 kids from another school come here either. So that's the other portion of that control.
Okay.
It is 20.
Jeremy,
20 is just
can we
a
fit on
traveling
the bus?
so to
Wait,
speak.
hold on. I'm getting two of you.
I'm sorry. How many can we fit on a bus, Jeremy?
Carrie, do you have that?
We put 42 on a big bus,
Okay,
socially distant.
Right. For track, we've been having two buses because our numbers are up there with the coaches and everything. But yeah, should be fine with no additional buses.
20 is the game day roster, Jeremy.
Say it again.
20 is the game day roster with coaches and so on.
Yeah, basically, if you had the whole team sitting on the bench, what would it be?
And we could kind of exceed that for our own practices if we broke them up.
Yes.
Into cohorts,
Yes.
so we could get more
Yeah,
children.
the worst case scenario would be that, we'd have to either rotate kids that wouldn't go to a game kind of thing. But again, I'm hopeful we're going to make it. But again, the other piece to it is that we know that we're not going to get 40 kids from another school coming into our gym or, that kind of thing. So I think we're going to make it. I got one team I'm a little concerned about because there's a lot of interest, but we may be able to pull some of those kids up, but then they might not play. But my goal is to let everybody be involved and not have to cut anybody and make this a negative experience when we're trying to provide a positive one. And I also want to point out, if you don't mind, just so the board is aware, we are not making major changes to our facilities. So you may be aware that our band uses the South Gym. That is going to stay as a band location. So we're giving that up athletically. We're not impacting the middle school, which half of it is being used for the cafeteria, unless we need to on an occasional basis where we'd have to move the chairs out and back in and cleaned and all that type of stuff, because we have half of the middle school gym that's used for physical education. That could be a practice spot, and the varsity now understands that they may have to practice with their JVs together in the 2/3 of the main gym. As you may know, we have the curtains that you can go east to west. So there are some sacrifices that they're going to have to make. Again, Dr. Massera mentioned our wrestling program is going to have split sessions where the lightweight kids are going to wrestle first. They're going to clean up and take off, and then the heavier kids are going to come in. So we're going to have less kids in that small room. So we're going to use every creative way to keep everybody safe, not impact our school day, our school instruction, our music program. We're juggling a bunch of balls, but we're fine. I've been practicing with the live streaming cameras that we installed this last summer. So we have that available for the gym, for the basketball and the wrestling meets. And then you may be aware that we have a second one that's outside on the turf. So I'm going to ask all of our outside sport teams, which may sometimes prefer to play on the stadium field. If we don't have parents at that time, which I'm hoping we will, at least some version, or some restrictions, but have some. But we will have that live streamed on the turf field because that was the easiest way to put the camera without an extra cost with the Wi-Fi and all that type of stuff.
Thank you.
Wait, Jeremy, what's the protocol going to be in regards to like kids coming into the gym? Like I know, like my daughter's playing travel volleyball right now, and they have to sanitize when they come in. They have to sanitize when they go out. The doors are open. All those things.
Yeah, well, the only thing right now we don't have is we don't have the doors open. We haven't. We can, but you know, with the cold weather, we don't. But we have sanitizing, just like phys ed, we have sanitizing stations there. Again, we're not using the locker rooms. The water fountains are turned off. They have to bring their own water bottles. They can only use the gang bathrooms by the cafeteria. Temperature checks, sign in for contact tracing, social distancing, wearing the mask at all times unless it's not tolerable during cardiovascular activity. So everything that we're supposed to follow, we're going to follow, and we're going to do it a little bit extra. Like I said, talking to the teams about distancing. You know, I walked in the first couple of days of these practice open gyms, and you know, reiterated to the kids and the coaches, you know, let's go an extra mile and move away from each other when they're trying to get get their breath again after running for the first time in 7 months. You know, so some kids were we had a couple of kids that
Hey, quick.
almost needed, you know, a time to get rid of their lunch, but we survived.
What's up, Bobby? Stop.
I was trying to figure out how to say that and not
Thank you.
Is that it from me? Can I go home?
Yeah, I think you can exit stage left there, Jeremy.
All right, I appreciate it. If anybody has any other questions, you know, please let me know. And I do want to let the board know, you know, quite a few parents reach out to us, and you know, we're continuing to hear the stories and the concerns and the challenges that we're all having as parents with our kids. You know, and the one thing I just want to make sure everybody's aware, and I want the public to know, is that we are training ourselves to respond immediately to any concerns, because anything that we can do to just, you know, let people breathe a little bit more, even if it's not the answer they want, it's important for us to get to them right away. So I just want to make sure the public knows, if you have any questions, you have any concerns, if there's anything bothering you, call me, email me tonight, tomorrow. I'll get back to you. And you know, that's the way we have to proceed right now, because we're all at the end of our rope, and you know, I understand it 100%.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy.
All right. Have a good night.
Good night.
All right. That brings us to any questions and comments regarding tonight's agenda only. And just to remind you, there'll be another question session at the end for anything that, for any topic. This one is for this agenda. Bill, it looks like we have a hand.
Yes, Lisa Marin. Hold on.
Thank you, Bill.
You're welcome.
Okay. Yeah, I was looking at the agenda, and especially particularly with the sports, and I couldn't open some documents that exhibit 13, I think it was. I can't see it now because you're on full screen, but it looks like there's a link to click to open up some of the exhibits, and when I click on the link, I don't have access. So I was wondering, because I'd like to read more about the testing and how that, well, I have questions about the testing and how it's going to be done and when it's going to be done, and is it going to be on the it's not going to be on the parents to do it, I don't think.
You know what, Ms. Marin, yeah, I'll tell you how that's going to happen. And you know, I want to be really clear. We want kids to be comfortable, and we want kids to play. And I was going to get into it a little bit earlier. As I indicated, I was actually responsible for developing this plan for testing. And so what it basically is, it is a rapid test. It's a low nasal swab. You know, we are going to have our own RN doing this, and it's a very, very quick, like, you know, kind of 5 swirls one way, 5 swirls the other, and it's done. It's not like a PCR that goes all the way to the back of the throat. And it would be in our, right in the area by our nurse's office, with the room that we actually use for our isolation room, in the event we have to isolate a suspected case of COVID. But I think what you're talking about is that there's a memorandum of agreement on there for testing in high-risk sports, and that's basically a memorandum, because you're talking about item 13. That memorandum of agreement is between the district and the county. And basically, that just is an assurance to the county that we're going to adhere to the protocols that they put together for testing to ensure we do it the way they want us to do it. And essentially, then any testing we do, we are working under their, what we refer to an LSL, a limited service laboratory. And that's necessary to work under their license. So that's why that is on there. The other point I want to make about the testing, however, is that if there are students and parents who are saying, well, hey, you know what, I'd rather go to my doctor and get tested, that's perfectly acceptable. We would be fine with, parents that want to take their children to, however, you have to keep in mind that the test has to be done once a week. And so we would need weekly assurance and weekly negative test reports, if parents were going to opt to go that route. Does that answer the questions?
Well, yeah, it was kind of like two questions. The first question is when I tap the link, I don't know why it's not accessible. I thought maybe all the exhibits on the agenda, because they're like blue links, I thought they would be accessible. So that's like a kind of a technological question. So I don't know if that's supposed to be accessible or it's not, but I was just interested in reading some of the exhibits and I wasn't able to get to them. And then, yeah, as far as the testing goes, yeah, I think it's great that it's gonna be done in school. And is it like, I mean, I don't know if you even have these details worked out yet. Is it going to be like every Friday? Is it going to start before the practices start? Because I know the kids, my daughter is doing open gym practices and I don't think there's been any testing done, just curious, like, when is it going to start? Is it going to start before practice? And what's the, protocol going to look like?
Okay, so we're basically, the only thing we haven't worked out is the flow of testing, if you will. The rosters need to be established for the school before we can do that, obviously. But recognizing how difficult this is to say within a week we're going to implement testing. Literally, I mean, I could tell you I spent significant time and just buttoned up the plan for the county just minutes before this this meeting, and I have some of my superintendent colleagues just reviewing it. But what we're essentially doing is making sure that once we get the flow, and I'm just going to give you, for example, okay, I don't have anything, but what I can tell you is we may have red cohort basketball players on Monday, white cohort basketball players on Tuesday, wrestling, on Wednesday and Thursday, we'll figure out a way so that it's a very manageable plan to get through all of the testing. And once we have our rosters in place, we can do that somewhat easily.
Okay, and the open gyms that are taking place now, there are protocols being followed in those too?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was late to the meeting, so if it was spoken about already, I missed it.
Forget about that part, but recognizing how difficult it is to put this in place, the testing has to be done before the first contest. Okay, so that doesn't mean that it has to be done right now. They're basically giving us that week to get everything in order, and then we'll have the testing done before the first game for any particular before the first basketball game, before the first wrestling meet. And so we will be getting it done expeditiously. But yes, all of the protocols must be followed that we're implementing for sports in the open gyms as well.
Oh, that's terrific. And let me tell you, I do appreciate, how much work and planning and everything that's going into it. I just, have concerns and just wanted to get as much information as possible. But I appreciate all the administrative and teacher work that's been done since last March. And this quick turnaround on the opening sports was announced, Sunday and then or Monday. And it's turning around very quickly. So thank you very much. But and thanks. And if I have any questions, I'll shoot Jeremy an email.
Sure.
Thank you.
Reach out to me anytime. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I will.
Thank you. Bill?
Okay, we have another one. Let me just exit out. And then we have Patrick. Okay, Patrick.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, I appreciate you taking the question. And
Patrick, what's your last name? Sorry.
Murray, M-U.
Oh, okay. Hi, Patrick. How are you?
Good. We're all good. And I appreciate all your efforts, and I'm excited about sports being open in a positive way, because we know that most of our kids are, I'm looking at fifth, sixth graders, eighth graders, ninth graders, depressed. Our kids are being just battered. And I'm sure you're all aware of that. And my feelings is I'm one of those that said, get them back in school as quickly as possible. Safely, yes, but they need to get back. And I guess some of my concerns is I'm thinking back when the Academy of Pediatrics months ago, as you're aware, I'm sure you're aware of all the stats, said kids need to be back in school. They're safer in school. And here we are, CDC comes out and says, yeah, kids should be in school. Well, we've lost the whole season, and COVID hasn't gone away. We're attacking it differently, getting new information. But the bottom line is the kids are still not back in school full time. So I appreciate all your efforts in that direction. And I'm excited about the sports being open, because kids needs, they need outside activities besides school. We all know that. So your continued efforts is much appreciated, but would be greatly appreciated is working on getting them back to school full time as soon as possible. That would be greatly appreciated from many of the parents. And, Raina put up the graph earlier about how people think, and that percentage of people that don't feel safe. Well, virtual is it's a great tool for those who choose not to be full time. But those that have students that need in-school teaching, learning, one-on-one, human contact, they're sorely are suffering. So your continued effort to get kids back in school would be greatly appreciated. So do you have any questions for me?
No, I thank you for that, and I think that obviously looking at what people want, clearly, there people want to see their kids back in school, and unfortunately that you know we are limited with what we can do in terms of adhering to that guidance and the CDC guidance and the social distancing, and that's the biggest roadblock we have. And we would have to, forsake that guidance completely. And that's the difficulty. That's the struggle.
Well, in similar areas, right down the road, as you're aware, East Moriches is open, St. John's is open. I don't want to go around the world and say what's open and what's worked, and what hasn't.
But I know that, there are some places that are open because they can get to 6 feet of social distancing. And there are other places that are ignoring 6 feet of social distancing. And I would never speak to who's who on that. But can't put myself as one of those that would be willing to do that.
Well, I appreciate that. But we also know that 99.7% of the youth will, successfully work out of COVID. And we've seen it, well, for the students that have had it. And I know there's the staff is a different situation, but we know that the students will be okay, even when contacting this virus. And so, I mean, it's a delicate situation. I understand that. But we're looking at other areas that have achieved full-time students in person without problem. So I'm sure. But go ahead.
No, I'm sorry to cut you off.
So that's just my personal feeling, and other parents that are around me that have kids that really need to be in school.
The only other point about that is that, the one thing that we have seen in the districts that have gone um, for greater capacity under 6 feet of social distance is we are seeing much more significant quarantine. So while they might come in for a week, they may be quarantined then for, a week and a half based on the 10-day mandatory quarantine, and then come in for another week or two and then be out for, and so there's somewhat of a lack of consistency in the instructional program. And, not saying what we have is perfect, but at least everybody knows what's expected on each day of the week.
And that
That's
is
the
pretty,
only saving grace.
yeah, we need the stability, because that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing the students that they seem to be thrive. They thrive when there's boundaries, when there's knowns. And so, yeah, I appreciate that. That's a great thought.
Thank you, Patrick.
I appreciate your
Appreciate the conversation. So thank you very much.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you all.
Okay. We have one more.
I'll just answer. Looks like Ms. Cressy has a question about the desk dividers. And I want to be clear on that, the district could add that as an added layer of protection, but it does not take the place of social distancing, and it has never been something that the CDC has said is a substitute, or our local health department has said is a substitute for social distancing. In fact, with the UK strain, I'm hearing that there is going to be, and this was coming from our Department of Health, there's a likely push to get away from even cloth masks and go towards only surgical type masks because the infection rate is so much more significant in this new variant, or the contagious rate.
Okay, we have one more. Christine Buff.
Unmute. Okay, now I am unmuted. Thank you. So thank you very much for sharing the responses from the survey. Very much appreciated. I will say I have literally like 7 questions, which is now kind of knocked down to 2 based on everything I've listened to. I want to understand what we need, who do we need to contact? Do we need to get out some kind of, I don't know, 411 or 911 to the CDC to ask them to consider renegotiating their, their rules? Do we have to put a petition to Governor Cuomo? I mean, I absolutely appreciate the sport situation, but it just seems so incredibly backwards that we are letting these kids wrestle and go up for rebounds on a basketball court, but we can't be less than 6 feet apart in a classroom. Like why is not everyone talking nicely together and playing nicely together in the sandbox? Like, I don't get it. And, I also don't understand why we are quarantining entire classrooms at the elementary school. Like, if they're all wearing masks and have dividers, what's causing entire classrooms of these little children to be completely quarantined unless they're not following the rules? So I don't know.
Okay, so a couple of things. You're asking the $1 million question. I don't know what the motivation is to all of a sudden give a week's notice to allow high-risk sports. I indicated earlier, we're going to do everything we can to try to protect the kids in sports. But you're right. If there's a child that has COVID and it's undetected for whatever reason and is wrestling with another child, I can't speak to what percentage chance that child has to catch COVID, but I got to imagine it's pretty high. And so I agree with you wholeheartedly on that, that this doesn't make sense when we are, when we're not allowing kids to come in, but yet we're allowing these other things. However, we are responding to our elected officials and the things that they're telling us we can and should be doing. And so we're making decisions based on the best information we have at any given time. I can assure you that when I woke up at 2:30 this morning and stared at the ceiling, it wasn't because something else woke me up. It was because of the burden I carry every day thinking about how to keep 1,500 kids safe in the Center Metro School District. And so I don't take that lightly, I can assure you. And as far as the quarantines in the elementary, we are doing everything based on the recommendations of the CDC and the guidance of our local health department. So basically that guidance suggests that if a child is in close proximity with another child or a teacher or whomever for more than 10 to 15 minutes over the course of a 24-hour period. Okay, so it could be an accumulated 1 minute here, 5 minutes here, 3 minutes there. In an elementary setting, the way children move, the way children have lunch together, the way they have recess together, it is almost impossible to determine who were the close contacts in that elementary setting, unless we had cameras on them and unless we chip them with those GPS devices that they use with college athletes, we wouldn't be able to tell who was in close proximity. And so out of an abundance of caution, we are in a position where we're left with no choice when we follow that guidance, but to quarantine entire classrooms. It's not a decision we take lightly, but it's a decision we do based on the guidance we have. And I promise you, I think when I mentioned to Ricardo Soto that he was going to be our COVID compliance officer back in July, I think he looked at it, he said, yeah, no problem, I can do that. And I think right now, I don't think he's very happy with me because he's the busiest man in the district. I got to be honest.
So, thank you. When when do these open gym practices happen? I mean, I have not received any communication that I'm aware of that there's any open gym anything happening. So I have one child that is, debating on trying JV basketball, but we've heard of nothing except it starts Monday. And then starting Monday doesn't mean you make the team. So I'm kind of confused here.
Okay, so again, I want you to understand that it's Wednesday, and I attended a press conference with the county executive at 2:30 or 3 o'clock on Monday afternoon, at which time he announced that we were going to be moving toward resumption of high-risk sports. So we were working on it, but we didn't have any definitive answer until that moment. Okay, so that's 3 o'clock on a Monday. On Tuesday, Jeremy Thode says, can we start playing? Can we start open gym? At which time I reached out to our Board of Education members and I said, hey, we're going to be playing. Does anybody have a problem with this? And our, there was no official vote because that's not allowed. But I did reach out and we did have a conversation with board members and we said, well, if this is what it is, we should probably start. So you're really not far out of the loop in terms of the communication. I want to assure you of that. The other thing that Jeremy though did emphasize was that, we really, we want to keep our kids playing. Yes, a travel roster to away games is limited at 20, but we do want to see our kids playing.
Okay, so one other question. So well, two things. One, thank you for not messing up with band or chorus and keeping those spaces available for those things, because that's a huge deal. So thank you. But if we're going to be testing these athletes once a week, I don't know, why can't we why can't we test the students once a week? And I know, yes, it's a space thing, but like I feel like if we could test the students once a week, and I know my kids would be willing to get tested if that meant they could come to school 5 days.
Mhm.
So again, I mean, if I get it, it's cold now, but can we have class outside in fourth quarter and get these kids under tents? And I mean, I kid you not, like being home is, I can't even, I say this to you every time, so I apologize, but
Yeah.
what can we do to get these kids in the building? I mean, I just like Patrick Murray, who I don't even know who that gentleman is. Everything he said, I was like, thank you, thank you, thank you. Because I agree with him. And I think everyone on this call who wants their kids back is agreeing.
Sure.
And I know you're saying what you're saying, but you know, and yes, there are schools that are having less than 6 feet, but if you're wearing your mask and following the rules, I think the kids that are older would be absolutely begging to follow the rules so that they could stay and be there. Again, I know you make the final decision, but
Listen, I don't make decisions in a vacuum, but I wear a pretty heavy burden with them. And I would say though, you have a couple questions in there. I think the first question is about testing. To test 1,500 kids once a week would be impossible. To be perfectly honest, we could test our athletes because we can get to that probably is less than about 80 kids per week that we're going to be testing, and we can spread them out over the course of the week. So that's a much more practical and doable thing that we can manage. But and then as far as the other stuff goes, I've always said I'm interested in looking at the data, looking at what we can do. If we can manage a way to bring kids back more, I am 100% open to it, and I am open to any suggestions. But we are in a very difficult, very very difficult situation right now with regard to capacity and our ability to maintain social distance.
okay, thank you.
Ron, quick question. How many, if I'm not mistaken, how many districts are in Suffolk County are back full time? 3 that I know of?
Three Village, Shoreham, Hop Hog, I think. And others are trying, but like I said, they are struggling. And the point I made to Mr. Murray, I think is important, is the and I hate to mention individual districts, but some districts that have done it or have experimented with it. There was one district that experimented with it in their secondary, and they had to quarantine the first day. They had to shut down the entire school on their first day, trying to bring the kids back, and then kind of rethought it. Like I said, I mean, if kids know that they're in 2 or 3 days a week, they know that, and they know what's expected on those days. They know what's expected on the remote days. That's worth something, as opposed to being in for 5 days and then having to be out for 7. And all of a sudden the unpredictability comes in terms of the instructional delivery.
Okay, we have a few more hands. Isabel Raimondi. Hello, Isabel.
While we're waiting, I see a comment in here about, can parents sign waivers to allow kids to come back? Basically what you're saying is that, you're gonna waive your right to, that means you're gonna waive your right to sue the district if a child gets COVID. That's not something that we really can put in place for, an assumption of risk. The other comment in there is about transportation, and saying that the elementary kids are sitting on the bus with their friends. We are doing what we can to manage the transportation. I'm not sure, we would have to look into what you're indicating about that. So if you could contact Ms. Laughlin tomorrow, she can explore your question.
All right, maybe Isabella got disconnected. We have one more hand up, Heather. And I'll promote.
Thank you. I just have a couple quick questions. One, first, I just want to thank the board and Dr. Becerra, obviously, for allowing our district to join in with Section 11 and having the kids return to the sporting events. My first question is, do we have any confirmed cases where a student contracted COVID from another student in the district in school?
It's actually impossible to know where somebody contracted it. We have potential concerns over a couple cases that arose parallel, but you can't tell whether that's in school, out of school, from somebody else. It's very difficult to tell. In-school transmission is according to Suffolk County Department of Health, according to the CDC, in-school transmission, as long as you're following 6-foot social distancing and masking, universal masking guidelines, is much less than anywhere else.
And with respect to, bringing the kids back, for more things, one of the things maybe we could consider is in-person honor society inductions for the high schoolers. We've had a couple of them via Zoom. I really appreciate the efforts of the advisors in trying to make that a good experience for the kids. Technologically, probably hasn't gone as well as hoped. But with those numbers, you're looking at, if you have 20 kids per team for basketball and you can have 40 kids in the gym for a basketball game, you would seem to believe you could have 40 kids socially distanced in a gym with masks for an honor society induction, even if the parents can't be there and it can just be broadcasted, but the kids can be together, celebrate in person, and partake, in that type of event.
I think that, especially as the spring comes around, we could absolutely, I saw my daughters on the bleachers. It was freezing cold. It was November, and it was quite cold, but at least we got to see it. And I agree that that would be much better than a digital ceremony. I tell you, Heather, today yesterday we were planning for the valedictorian luncheon, which is a huge event in Suffolk County, where all the valedictorians show up at Lombardi's and we honor them. And we're struggling with what to do. Last year we canceled it, and this year, we want to do something, and we're not sure if we can even do a virtual. But clearly, I think as the weather changes, it makes it much easier, and smaller events, perhaps we can explore doing more stuff inside. I'll bring that up on the, I see Janine's going to put that down on our administrative council agenda for tomorrow.
Thanks. And then just my last question was for Carrie from her presentation. I think you had mentioned that you already had the tax cap calculated for next year. Do you know what that number is?
0.67.
0.67. Okay.
We'll give that full calculation at the next meeting, all the details behind it.
All right. Thank you
And
so much.
No problem.
And as you can imagine, our advocacy is to get a flat 2.
Right. Yeah. No, I know. I hear you. The only thing I want to just remind the board is the first and only time we tried to pierce the cap, it was a horrible failure. So we just have to go back and look at those numbers.
Yeah, we remember, Heather.
Yeah, it was. I remember all too well because I sat there and had to make that decision and then had to deal with the fallout of it. So it's not a fun thing to do. So
no, it's not. But we'll do the best that we can and come up with the most responsible spending plan that we possibly can.
But thankfully, this time, a flat 2, it is different from what we tried to do because we tried to pierce the cap and go in excess of 2%. So if you're looking at 2% versus the 0.67, I think you'll definitely have a lot more success than we had in the past. So
I sure hope so.
thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, Heather.
It looks like Danielle Ramondi was asking about what percentage we need to be at in regards to infection rate in order for us to go back to school. Danielle, it's actually not about the infection rate. Clearly, the infection rate is concerning because we're so high, but it's really about social distancing and what the CDC and the Department of Health says. Even if the infection rate, even when the infection rate was only at 1%, we still were not we didn't come back because we needed the social distance. So that actually does not play into full capacity. And then Stacy Jean asked about accessing the exhibits in the agenda, and those will be available once this is the meeting is done.
How we doing, Bill?
No more hands. I think we're good.
Okay. All right. So that brings us to the approval of minutes. The Board of Education is asked to accept the minutes of the following meetings as prepared by the district clerk. Minutes of the meeting of the Board of Education on January 13th, 2020. Motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second,
All in favor?
Yes.
yes.
Motion carries unanimously. Is it your turn now or mine? Still.
Yeah, I'll go.
Okay. Thank you.
The financial report section. Be it resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, accepts the following financial reports. A, Student Activity Treasury Report from December 2020. Budget transfers, there's one page of those. And Treasurer's Report for December 2020.
Motion? Motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes. Motion carries unanimously.
Consent agenda vote. Be it resolved, a motion to approve the consent agenda. Asterisk items, agenda items are consent agenda items. Consent agenda items are approved via a single vote unless they are removed from being a consent item prior to the vote.
Motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second,
Second.
All in favor? Yes.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. That brings us all the way down to discussion item committee reports.
Yeah, I think we did report out on much of the committees. Anybody have any committee reports that we did not touch on last week that have anything to discuss? Oh, Rainey, you had a curriculum committee? You want to mention that?
Sure. Yes, we had a curriculum committee yesterday afternoon. I actually shared some of the highlights. Our curriculum highlights were the art students, some of the work that middle school art's doing, the Dan Cadraco piece that you mentioned at the meeting today. We talked about professional development, upcoming professional development in elementary reading, elementary science, and we talked about the professional development planning that's going on for next year as well. So those were the basic, highlights of discussion points for that committee. We also talked about the in-person learning survey and the school climate survey. That's still open.
Okay. And Ricardo, you didn't have a tech report, but I know we got some good news today from the My Brother's Keeper. You want to just mention that?
Yes, we actually have a grant that's going to supply students at the reservation with 75 Chromebooks, which is a great addition and a great assistance to us. So that was very good news that we received today. Thank you, Mrs. Lachlan, for getting us that information. That was a great email to read. So we're doing well with that. We had a good distribution of our Chromebooks to the high school, our one-to-one initiative over the last 2 weeks. We currently distributed Chromebooks to about 69% of our high school population. So that's going really well. We have about 178 students that are choosing a BYOD, which is bring your own device to school as an option. We are looking at getting all the declination forms, which we talked about at the last meeting, out to all the students so that they can sign them, so we can ensure that every student in class has a device. And when I say device, it is a Chromebook, it is a laptop, it is an iPad. A device is not, as per the New York State Department of Education, is not a cell phone. So a cell phone is not considered a device, but is a laptop that can complete assignments and sort of access assignments via a Google platform or other kind of instructional platform that the teachers are utilizing. So it was a good last 2 weeks. We are hoping to finalize the one-to-one initiative at the high school within the next week or so as we get all the declination forms. And then we're going to have a discussion regarding pushing our one-to-one initiative at the middle school. So it's a really exciting time at the secondary complex in terms of technology. Any questions? Or?
No, that's great. What a great donation. And we're getting
Yeah.
closer and closer. So
We definitely are, George.
yeah, so that's really good stuff.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Legislative committee will meet next week, and we have Longwood Legislative Breakfast coming up. So that's coming. That's good. And we'll be able to report out more there. All right, that's all I have there, I think. Anybody else have anything? Thank you, Ricardo.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is general public comments. So if you have anything about anything, now's the time. Questions, comments? I feel like we covered a lot of them in the first session. But if anybody had any follow-ups? We do always appreciate the public coming and asking the questions and voicing the opinions, and I do want to continue to assure you that we want what you want as well. And we want to make sure that we're doing it in a way that's safe for staff, for students, for everybody. So thank you. We do have a chat comment. Ron, I don't know if somebody has a question in there.
Oh, Carrie Coonan just her daughter is the Sherpa, if you recall. So she said thanks for the
Right.
consideration of the lockers, greatly appreciated.
Right. And as you know, we get new information and new things happen, like with the athletics, and we're going to re-examine what we do, and things like the Honor Society is a great suggestion. So we'll sure Ron, you in the cabinet will look at that and see what we can do in terms of that. So we just got to be patient and do the best we can. So thank you, everybody. Motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
Second.
Okay.
All in favor?
Yes.
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 Yeah.
Motion carries unanimously, and I think we're good.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Informational items, next Board of Ed meeting, February 10, 2021. That's unbelievable. It's 2021. 6:00 p.m. is exec, and then action meeting approximately 7. I think we started at 7:02 today. So. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.